Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C., the podcast where we dive into stories behind success, uncovering lessons learned and the insights gained by leaders and innovators in the business world. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Peggy Van de Blanchet. Peggy is a business and finance executive turned microdosing expert. Today, we will unravel how this practice is making its way into the boardroom. Peggy will share her personal journey and the insights she's gained from transitioning from high stakes finance to the forefront of wellness innovation. Whether you're curious about microdosing or wanting to try it and don't know how to get started, this episode is for you. Hi, Peggy. Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you again. How are you today?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited. I've been
Oh my gosh.
excited all day to chat with you. So that's very cool.
I'm so excited to have you. I know you and I we've met, we've had conversations, and then I heard about this amazing book you wrote, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you gotta come on the podcast. So I'm so excited to get into this conversation. But before we do that,
Yes.
could you just start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself for those who may have never heard of you?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Sonia. So I know you mentioned quite a bit already in your intro, and so people know I've worked in finance. I was a venture capitalist. I was investing in financial technology for close to 20 years. And I would say by all account, I was quite successful. I was an exec early in my 30s. Again, like every boxes had been checked. But the challenge I had was that I was feeling empty, very stressed, very stressed, anxious, a bit of depression as well. And I think many people who are listening today might relate to that. Maybe very successful entrepreneur, maybe executives, but it comes with a big price. And I had totally lost my zest for life, to be totally honest. And I started researching psychedelics. And I realized that there were a lot of super interesting studies. And I decided, you know what? I don't have a lot to lose at this point. So I started microdosing, which is taking very small dose. And we're going to get into that in a minute. And the results for me were super positive. I did some research. I saw the size of the market. I saw the appetite from people when I was explaining my story. And I was like, you know what? There is a business here. So I fully transitioned from being a finance person to being in the wellness and psychedelic space. So now I have a platform, I would say the Microdose Diet. It's a full-fledged platform. I have a book, microdosing product, online course. I do coaching, workshop, keynotes. So it can look like a weird transition going from, finance to psychedelics, but there was a reason. And like many people in the psychedelic space, there was a personal reason to that. And for me, the personal reason was myself.
Awesome. I love it. And we're going to get into all of that. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions for you. Okay. So before we get there, for those who don't know a lot about psychedelics
Yeah.
and microdosing, could you start by explaining what is microdosing and how
Yeah.
does it differ from more traditional uses of psychedelics?
Yes, and it's a great question. Thank you. I think it's good we start with that, so it gives good background. So microdosing, like the name say it all, I would say it's taking very small dose of a substance. That can be psychedelics, that can be something else. I heard people who microdose Ozempic, so you can really microdose anything. But in the context of psychedelics, and especially in the context of magic mushroom or psilocybin, which is what I am most interested in, you're taking 100 milligram of magic mushroom every other day or every 3 days. So you're not taking it every day. And you're doing that, I would say, for three different type of benefits. Mental health, performance, and connection. And we can go into that in more details. When you take your microdose, I would recommend to take it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. That's probably the best way, or in your smoothie if it's easier for you. And just make sure that you have very high quality product and that you follow a good protocol. So it's not taking one week, five the following week, two the week after. Think about it as a medicine. You stay with a constant dosage, you use a good product, and you have a good schedule. And last but not least, you have an intention. Why are you doing that? And that's something we tend to forget with medicine. We tend to just pop the pill. But what is your intention? So that's in a nutshell what microdosing is.
Right. So, what led you? I know you talked about it a little bit in the beginning in your intro, but where were you, and what went through your mind that led you to say, "I'm going to go down this path and I'm going to try this"? I know you said you were struggling a little bit, and then I also want to know, how did this change you?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. Well, listen, to be fair, I probably had anxiety since I was a kid,
Mm,
which I didn't realize because that was my normal state, to be very anxious, hyper vigilant. Um, One thing that though increased with time was the level of stress, but also the depression, the negativity. And at some point, I really reached, a level where I was like, okay, my life is not enjoyable. I
mm,
don't have fun, So yes, I'm checking all the boxes of successful career and a lovely husband and friends and house and travels. But, a bit like the Rolling Stones used to say, I can get no satisfaction. And I didn't want to live my life like this. I really wanted to bring back, that passion, that zest for life. And that's really why I started looking into options. And if you look into that, if some of the people who are listening maybe have already looked into that, usually you have two options. It's talk therapy and it's antidepressant, anti-anxiety medications, prescribed drugs, very often in combination. And I had done talk therapy multiple times in my life, but has not, unfortunately, created a lot of value for me.
mm,
And I was not super keen on prescribed drugs because they don't heal you, they manage the symptoms. And I really wanted to get better on the long term by addressing the roots of the problem.
mm,
And that's how I started to do more research. I knew absolutely nothing on psychedelics.
mhm.
But as I was doing all my research, I'm like, oh my God, this is compelling. And that's how it started. So, really, not from, I didn't study biochemistry, like absolutely not. I really had to find a solution for myself.
And how, like, after you started microdosing, how
Yeah.
has it made you physically feel? How has it changed your life?
Yes, so when I started, I tested different dosage because I wanted to take the minimum dosage that was making an impact for you. So I would say the first few weeks were a bit like, a bit more, a bit, But once I stabilized my regimen, which is the one I present in my book, so it's good for everyone. After you can play a little bit with it, but um, you know what? It's as if how can I say that? Like the black cloud, the dark cloud that was always with me had lifted. But also you could really pinpoint things that were very precise. So I used to be extremely, extremely vigilant. So there would be literally a pin dropping on the sidewalk. I would already be climbing a tree. That's how anxious as I was. Now not the case anymore. I used to have a huge neurosis with time. So let's say we are meeting at 2 p.m. today. Since 11 a.m., I would have been at my desk looking at the clock,
Wow.
which is very painful because it is exhausting emotionally, mentally, but you can imagine physically how complex it is to manage a very busy agenda when
Yeah.
you always need to be like 30, 40 an hour in advance of each appointment. And so I was extremely controlling because I was so fearful. Yeah. So that is done now. So I mean, if it was just that, it would already be absolutely great. But my performance also has really improved. which might be something I guess many people who are listening today are interested in: performance, focus, attention.
Yeah, and we will talk about that. But before we get there, I just want to talk about like psychedelics are very new. There hasn't been, I don't know, I actually don't know that much. So I'm actually going to ask you the question. I don't know if there's been like a lot of research into long-term effects and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course, thank you. And thank you for that question. I love having questions, to your point, with people who might not know a lot about psychedelics, because that's the best way to kill myth.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we're just talking at a level that doesn't really resonate with everyone. So that's very interesting, because actually psychedelics were widely researched in the 50s and the 60s, until Nixon put psychedelics in, I would say, the same basket than heroin, cocaine, all these very, very nefarious drugs in his so-called war on drugs. So before the 70s, actually, you had studies in the most prestigious universities and labs to help people with addiction to alcoholism,
Oh,
using psychedelics. So actually, the studies you're seeing now, these are unfortunately continuation of studies that have started 70 years ago,
wow.
but that were stopped for 30, 40 years because the political establishment decided that they didn't want us to go there. So it is actually very old, I would say, for the Western world, but it is a medicine that has been used by indigenous population for hundreds of years. So you also have a lot of anecdotal data
Mhm.
coming from not labs, but people who have used it in their own religious ceremonies. So you can have multiple type of data, the really scientific, done in a lab type of data, but also anecdotal data from, I would say, more traditional people.
Love it. Okay. So what led you from a career in business and finance to becoming an expert in microdosing? Where there was there a particular moment or experience that catalyzed that shift? Because I know you talked about, you weren't feeling well, you sort of want to change, but you had your career and all of a sudden you've completely changed it.
Yeah. So it was a couple of things. The first thing was, like many people, the pandemic, where I would say my field took a left turn. When the pandemic hit, now we're looking at it and it's to be like, oh, it's a non-event kind of. But, everything was frozen. There was not one, that you were in tech. There's not $1 that was allocated to startup. I was actually in the process of buying a tech company with a business partner. The deal fell apart. So it was a push and a pull where my entire business just crumbled.
Mhm.
And I saw the market and the opportunity in the psychedelic world. And I was just like, you know what? That might be the timing to do something. So it was multiple things at the same time. And to be fair, I didn't go 0 to 100.
Right.
So I started writing a book. Then, no, actually, I had a newsletter, and more my newsletter, which was on tech and finance, became a newsletter on psychedelics. So I could see people interest. Then I started writing a book. Then I started talking about it. Then I launched a product. So now you look at it and you're like, oh my God, it's a full-fledged platform. But it
Yeah.
took 2 years
I
to
get
do
it.
just to publish a book. It takes like 12, 14 months because it was traditionally published. If you self-publish, it's faster. But so just that, again, if we had talked a year ago, I would have had way less under my belt. So now it looks like, oh my God, you overnight you flip the switch. It was way more progressive than that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you a little bit. I'm also not surprised that you are where you are. You're when you put your mind to something, you get it done. So there's
Thank you so much. That's very kind of you.
um so thank you for the copy of the book, by the way. I loved it. And you mentioned that microdosing is making its way into the boardroom, which is something I want to talk about.
Mhm.
How is this practice being received amongst top executives, and what changes are you
Yeah.
observing in the corporate cultures?
Yeah. So it's very interesting because, everyone wants an edge, you know. So microdosing really, I won't say started, but restarted in Silicon Valley
Mm.
15 years ago, because tech entrepreneurs, VCs, how Silicon Valley is extremely competitive. People want that edge. And obviously, things always make their way slowly north and slowly east. So now you have more and more people microdosing here in Canada, in Toronto, in the East Coast. And depending on who you are, it is different reason. Of course, you have a lot of corporate executive entrepreneurs who are interested again for this performance aspect, and being able to focus, like I can do in actually I almost have the opposite problem now. I need to be very careful not to burn out, because I can do in 4 hours a full 8 hour day. So I need to make sure I work 4 hours and not eight.
Oh
So,
wow.
so I work way less now because I'm very, very mindful not to burn myself. So that's something you also need to be mindful. But for many people, just the fact that they can be so much more efficient, I mean, it's fabulous. Plus the creativity. So you see way more options, all of that. So the performance is something execs, entrepreneur absolutely love, but they are people too. And I can tell you that the mental health aspect and the emotional well-being as well is something that is really, really appreciated. People might not want to say that it is the reason they are microdosing or they want microdosing. They are going to focus on performance because it is more socially acceptable in our business world to talk about, well, I'm doing it for performance, than to say, well, I'm doing it because I'm very anxious or, I'm depressed. But people appreciate very much, again, that space, that 1 second you have between someone tells you something and you act instead of reacting. So it creates a lot of space. I think that's the best way to say it. And it's space for creativity, it's space for performance, but it's also space in order to be a better leader. And that is extremely appreciated. The downside is that no one wants to talk about it, because it is still very much stigmatized. And let's be honest, in many places, it is also illegal. So rightfully so, most people, I mean, I have people who lead billion-dollar companies that are on board of very large public companies. No one will ever admit they're microdosing.
Yeah.
And we have people like in the legal field. I had someone who was actually in the government in the US. And so it is very unfortunate, because I think if we were all more transparent, first, the changes would happen faster,
Mhm.
but also so many people who need it would feel more comfortable, or maybe they would just be aware because they just don't know it exists. So yeah.
Yeah.
For me, what I've seen with, my clients and myself, again, it's just to be mindful, not to understand that, you can do in 4 hours what you used to do in 8. So maybe not working as much, because, that's going to be extremely draining for your mind and body. I would say that's probably the first thing. Other than that, when you microdose, because the dosage is at sub-perception level, you don't feel any high. So it's as if you're taking, I don't know, maybe you take omega-3 in the morning, or maybe you're taking vitamin B, C, D, whatever. I take a whole array of supplements, but you don't feel anything, like it's
Mm.
working in the background. So you're not going to go to the office and feel fidgety or feel, spacey. It is absolutely not that type of protocol.
Mm.
And you were mentioning the big dosage. And I think that's where there is sometimes a myth is people confuse when people do a 3 to 5 gram a trip, and the microdosing, which is only 100 milligram. So
Right.
very, very, very different. Yeah.
So there's so many types of psychedelics or mushrooms out there, let's say it.
Mhm.
How do you even start a journey into microdosing? Like
Yeah.
how much, like which, not just about like the amount, but like
Mhm.
which type of mushrooms do you take?
Yeah.
Is there a specific type for a certain symptom, or you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
how do you start?
So that's a great question. So you have two options when you want to microdose with psychedelics. It's whether magic mushrooms, whether LSD. Personally, I like better mushroom because it's natural, it's
Mm,
easier to access, it's easier to make sure the quality is high, and it's also very cheap. So that's I would say my psychedelic of predilection is mushroom, whether for microdosing or for a big ceremony. So if you look at the different, there are hundreds literally of magic mushrooms. It's not something that is very rare. Let's be honest. So you have, I would say, some strains that are more common. So, for example, the golden teacher is a very, very mild type of mushroom, and it's something that is nice and easy to start with. Very often you see a blend of mushroom, or you see cubensis, which is also a mushroom that is very, very common. So I would say you have some of them that are way stronger. So there is one that has a terrible name, which is called penis envy, which
that is
definitely
a
could.
terrible name.
Yes, and they could definitely use a rebrand, let's be honest. Not sure who came up with that name, but that's not great. So this is way stronger.
Okay.
So that's not the type of mushroom I would microdose with. But I microdose. So I worked with a clinic in BC to develop my microdosing product based on the microdose diet protocol. Very often, when you microdose, people who buy microdosing products, they don't buy dry mushroom and cut them. They buy products that are already prepackaged. So whether in caps, whether as edibles in chocolate or something like that. So that is likely to be already a mushroom that is made for microdosing.
Okay.
So that's probably removing a lot from the guesswork and the research. Yeah.
Okay. Where do you see the future of microdosing in professional environments? Do you think it will become more mainstream?
I already see it becoming more mainstream. It's just that is undercover. So I know people who work at very large banks. I mentioned who work in the government, who work in tech companies. So it's just the question of going from a small percentage to a bigger percentage to a bigger percentage. So it I just see it going bigger and bigger simply because people see the benefit they are getting, and why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah. Can you overdose from microdosing?
No, so psychedelics are special, I would say, in the sense that they are not addictive, which is very important, obviously, as
Good.
you can imagine. And you cannot overdose on psychedelics. So you might have a bad trip if you end up taking, I don't know, 7 gram, 8 gram of mushrooms, but I'm not sure why you would do that, but that's another problem. But there's not much value in doing that. But it is not the type of things where if you're saying, well, instead of taking 1 cap, I'm taking 2 caps, and it's, oh my God, dangerous. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Especially from microdosing to macro, you already have such, like a difference of dosage,
Mhm.
like 100 milligram versus 5 gram. You can imagine
Yeah.
it's already 1 to 50. And 5 gram is what I take when I do a ceremony with a shaman or a guide.
Yeah.
So you're far from being in, of course, don't drive after. I mean, it's just the common sense, you're not going to take 5 grams of mushrooms to do a ceremony with a shaman and then take your car. But
Right.
that is just common sense,
Yeah.
like
You take an Uber.
exactly. Ideally sleep there.
Well, it's just like when you drink a glass of wine, or two or three,
Yeah.
don't drive, right?
Well,
You're taking a substance that's gonna do something.
the second your mind, your consciousness is altered, you
Mm,
need to understand what it means. So, alcohol it's very interesting. You're talking about alcohol because alcohol is legal, obviously, if you're above 19 here in Canada, but there is absolutely no health benefits into that.
yeah.
But
Good.
nonetheless, it is legal. Same thing with tobacco.
Yeah.
But psychedelic, as you have to jump through so many hoops, while actually there is a lot of benefits. So it's just interesting. It's the if you really look at history, you see the evolution of a legal framework. You
Mhm.
see the evolution as well of the public opinion. And that's really what makes something legal or illegal. It has absolutely nothing to do with the reality, really.
So I understand everything you're saying, but I want to play like devil's advocate a little bit. 'Cause,
Absolutely.
you're right. Public opinion does have an influence on everything. So, what would you say to people that are like, well, this is the beginning of the end? Where do you draw the line where drugs is drugs and we don't
Yeah.
legalize them, right? For anyone who doesn't really quite fully understand
Yeah.
mushrooms, psychedelics yet. And I encourage people to really look into it. But let's talk about the fact that,
Yeah.
in Canada, marijuana is now legal. And
Hmm.
so sometimes it feels like we're going down this path of like, where do we stop? Like, what's
Yeah.
next? What would
Yeah.
you say to that? Because I know that you understand mushrooms and psychedelics very well. So can you like just
Yeah.
educate the public a little bit more on?
Yeah. Yeah. And the big challenge with drugs as a general concept is about protecting the population at the
Yeah.
end of the day. Why? I think we need to come back to the origin of why some substances are classified as Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, and the goal is obviously rightfully so to protect and serve the population. And when these classifications were put in place, as I said, in the 70s, if you look at psychedelics in particular, there was a lot of unrest in the US because the youth didn't want to go to Vietnam, rightfully so. And you also had a lot of racial tension. And the Nixon administration thought that psychedelics was actually contributing to the fact that the youth was rebelling.
Mm-hmm.
And because psychedelic has also this ability to rewire your brain, but also to help you because you have this lapse between your action and your reaction, you have more critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that obviously governments are not necessarily crazy about because now you're questioning going to war and you're questioning racial keep in mind that at the time you still, and there is still actually, but there was a lot of racial tension in the US. So it was a way to kind of solve a political problem. And actually, the US put tremendous pressure in other countries, Canada, but also Europe, to follow suit. And everyone did that. And everyone went from psychedelics were legal to now they're illegal. So I think it's important to understand that the substance by itself is not a substance that's going to harm people. On
Mm-hmm.
the contrary. So this is, I think, a different way of looking at things. It's not to say, well, now we're legalizing something. No, it's something that was legal, that
Mm-hmm.
was put as illegal because it was not convenient. And think about the prohibition with alcohol.
Yeah.
It was legal, it's not legal, no, it's legal. Well, it's a bit the same thing. You're getting out of a prohibition of psychedelics, even if psychedelics, contrary to alcohol or tobacco, have actually health benefits. And trust me, I love to have a glass of wine. I'm not I'm not anti-alcohol, but it's difficult not to notice
Yeah.
the, the cognitive dissonance between the different substance. It's very difficult to justify why one is legal and one is not, actually.
Okay. We're coming up on time, but I do want to ask you another question. So you brought this up in the beginning. I just want to talk about it a little bit. So, people who are struggling with mental health are given medication, and you quote me if I'm wrong. You said sort of like covers or temporary fixes the problem, but doesn't fix it long term. I find that a lot of people that I talk to that are struggling with mental health, depression, anxiety, they always tell me that a lot of the medication is very highly addictive and they get
Mhm.
addicted to it. And then coming off of it is like a major problem and they get a lot more depressed
Yeah.
or they become super dependent on it or they can't function without it. So if these drugs that we have now that are being given to patients that are struggling with mental health are not exactly good for them,
Mhm.
why isn't things like microdosing and mushrooms an option in healthcare? I know the answer, but I still have to ask because
Yeah, it's
crazy to
the
me.
it's the multi-billion-dollar question of recurring revenue. But well, first, imagine if you're big pharma. Do I want you to be cured, or do I want you to have a crutch that you're gonna keep for decades? All my girlfriends are actually, oddly enough, whether on anti-anxiety, whether on anti-depression medication, and they've been on it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Imagine the lifetime value of a client. It's pretty nice. I mean, we're both we understand what recurring revenue means, so that's great.
Yeah.
So you obviously don't want to kill the golden goose. So it's the idea of, first, I'm not curing and I'm keeping you. Do I want to displace with a very cheap medication? Because I see all these healthcare companies who are trying to play a bit with the molecules, add this, add that. They're doing that because they can patent it after that. But you don't need to do that. You can basically just use plain mushroom. And yeah, you can add some adaptogens like a lion's mane or, a green tea extract. But that is not very sexy because then nothing can be patented. There is no IP there. So, like the answer, you knew the answer when you asked the question, is that it's not beneficial for anyone. It's a race to the bottom in terms of revenue for big pharma. Yeah.
It's so sad that as a society, that's what we care about. Meanwhile, people are out there just, I mean, I feel like that after COVID, mental health just went through the roof.
Oh,
I feel like it just got so much worse.
oh
And
yeah.
people started drinking a lot during COVID. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it
And
just feels crazy to me that as a society, we don't care about people being healthy. We care about
Mhm.
people being sick so that we can keep
Yeah.
making money off of them. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like there is not necessarily a huge conspiration. I think it's, well, the system has been built like this. You continue day after day, da, 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 da. So I don't think you have, and maybe there is, I don't know, maybe there is collusion, but you don't even need collusion.
Mm,
Doctors are used to prescribing certain things. That's what they know. It's the inertia in the system that is killing us. Yeah.
yeah. So we are up on time, but before we wrap up, one last question. Is there anything that you want to share with our audience about professionals that want to consider microdosing for performance? I mean, I'm totally going to try it, but anything that you want to leave our audience?
Yeah. Couple of things. First, educate yourself. Educate yourself, educate yourself. That's great. You're listening to me. That's fabulous. Maybe put a little seed in your head. It's still enough. It's not enough. Triangulate, make sure that what you listen makes sense, and look at what is best for you. So that's something that I believe is very important. Second, we mention it, make sure to buy quality product, follow a quality protocol. do it strategically and intelligently. If you're doing it it's not going to explode if you're not doing that, but it's going to be way more beneficial to you if you do it mindfully. So again, education and good product, good protocol.
And is that something that you help people with in your program?
Oh, yes, actually. Well, as I said, I sell products on my website, but I also offer coaching. If people don't like coaching, they can buy an online course and do it themselves. And they can also just buy the book and follow the book. So they can do it, in 25 different ways. So it's very easy, and depending on people's financial means and time they want to allocate, they can pick what makes sense for them. They just have to go to my website, themicrodosediet.com. All the information is there.
And your course, you actually show people how to start microdosing,
Exactly.
where to buy the products, you know, dosages, types of mushrooms and things like that.
They can find any of the information on the course. I also have a free newsletter.
Okay.
So, if before investing or trying anything, people can just go to the Microdose Diet, which is the name of my newsletter, is on Substack. They can find the link on my website, and they're going to find tons of information. So that's going to be also helpful for them to make up their mind, but also to understand better what is the optimum way to microdose psilocybin.
Awesome. And I'll put all the links to your website and your book,
Thank you.
everything when the episode goes live.
Thank
Peggy,
you so much, Sonia.
so much for coming
Yeah,
on. I mean, I
thank
feel
you.
like I could go on and on and on and on, ask you a million questions. This was so educational. I so appreciate your time for, writing the book, doing the research, sharing your message with the world. I think it's great. I think it's really good to have alternatives and make
Exactly.
decisions that are right for you, not necessarily what your doctors tell you, right? I think
Exactly.
people need to be more aware, and people like you are doing that. So I'm
Yeah.
so appreciative of that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for your platform. As you know, I love listening to your podcast, and I really like that you're bringing people from different horizons. And I think that's what we need. Again, we need that critical thinking. That that's the only way for us as a human, as a species, to evolve. And we need to think more. So thank you for doing your part, educating us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap. Thank you, Peggy, for this fascinating discussion and for shedding light on such a transformative topic. It's clear that microdosing holds a significant potential for enhancing mental clarity, reducing stress, and boosting performance in ways we could never have imagined. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and join our community on social media. I would love to hear from you. Leave a review and tell me what topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace change and innovation with tenacity. Keep striving, keep innovating, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to bringing you more inspiring conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, remember to chase your dreams with tenacity.